Hi again guys, and welcome to episode 34 of Days Gone By, the review series for the classic and also some vintage cars on Gran Turismo. And in this particular episode we're featuring one of the most iconic cars in motorsports history of this whole series. And for good reason. Very, very successful, very unique, kind of oddball, and these days really expensive. Now on the game, the rally version of this car, which is of course the Lancia Stratos, is the most expensive rally car in the game at 2 million credits. That's more, well, than any other rally car. Is it worth that much? Well, that's kind of down to personal preference. For me personally, no. For some people, probably. What about the road version though? Because this is also a very expensive car for what it is. Now, being a legendary, highly collectible, premium classic, yes, of course it's going to be expensive, but 375,000 credits is quite a bit. Now, there are some other classics and vintage cars which cost a lot as well. So the question is this purely to be viewed as a collector's piece, in which you can kind of justify a car within that category in being expensive? At least that gives you something to work towards. It makes it feel like more of a special occasion when you save up for the car and buy it and own it and take it out to show it off online. But if the car can also offer some kind of usability along with that, in terms of competitive ability in rallying, road racing, drag racing, top speed racing, then that will always add a level of quality on top of just being a good collector's piece. So the question is, does the Stratos offer that for 375,000 credits? Well, this is a pretty notorious vehicle, probably at least as notorious as the Speed 12 and the Shelby Cobra for being difficult to drive, notoriously difficult to drive on the road. On the dirt, funnily enough, it's not that difficult to drive a Stratos. On the road, though, it's a completely different ball game. The car is twitchy, the short wheelbase and comparatively high power for its age mean that it can be kind of awkward. There's not really anything else like this in the classic category. Even the Dome Zero, which is about as close to it as you can get, doesn't really feel anything like this car. And overall, the reason why I'm saying that is because when you don't have many vehicles that are similar to this, it means that unless you drive the Stratos all the time, for instance if you're a super fan of the car, then it just means you're not going to have as much pure experience of driving a vehicle like this. And as such, the way it drives, the way it handles, the way it performs feels more alien. Whereas driving something that's a generic front-engine rear-wheel drive sports car like a TVR or a Mustang or a whatever, of course you're going to be able to get relatively good control of the car because you drive so many vehicles like that. There are some exceptions like the aforementioned Cobra, but that tends to be because of age. They just don't have the level of equipment and control that comes with that equipment that a newer car will have. In the case of the Stratos though, that's not the case. There are just so few vehicles like this that it's completely unique to drive, kind of like the Audi Streamliner. There really is nothing else that drives like that car. So the question is, can it be brought under control and used for racing, or is it not really worth that kind of effort? Well, I used to believe that this car wasn't really worth the effort, because consider what you get. So you get a Ferrari engine, if I remember correctly. I believe it's the same engine as used in the Ferrari Dino, and that engine is a 2.4 litre, mid-mounted with rear-wheel drive, and you can turbocharge that engine up to a reasonably impressive 405 horsepower. It also puts out 287 foot-pounds of torque, and it is a reasonably lightweight vehicle, not perhaps as light as you might assume, given its small size, but certainly at 857 kilos it's not overly heavy. Now the horsepower per tonne is pretty good, 473 certainly isn't bad, but again, not quite as high as you might hope for a vehicle like this. The PP is also, I would say, a little too high, to say the least, at 532, considering that at that level you can get stuff like Nissan GTRs or heavily modified Skylines, various other vehicles which will quite easily dispatch a Stratos. And as such, is it worth that kind of effort? Well, with some tuning, albeit slightly different tuning to what you might do on a different car, you actually can bring the Stratos under control. And when you do, it's not perfect, because as I've mentioned before in other series, there are certain vehicles where you just can't change their nature. They will always perform like that to some degree. That will always be there just under the surface even when you do bring them under control. But you can bring the Stratos under enough control with the right tuning to actually be genuinely competitive. Now, in its fully tuned form, no, definitely not. It's just not competitive enough at such a high PP level. But for something like, say, 450 or 475 or maybe 500 at a push, but I wouldn't really recommend it, it can be useful. Now, speaking purely from the factual side of things, putting preference and style and collectability aside, for the pure money, there are far better vehicles that you can buy for less cash than a Stratos, even in the classic or vintage category. There's no question about that. There are far better cars. So the bare bones facts question is, should you buy one or not? Well, it depends what kind of driver you are. If you're a fan of the Stratos, you'll love it. If you're a collector, you'll probably quite like it, maybe. If you're looking purely for performance for your money, it's not that it can't give you that, because it can. It's more a question of, is it worth it? Because there are just vehicles that you can get better performance from easier and for less cash. So if you fancy a challenge, check out the Stratos for racing. Otherwise, it's more of a collector's piece. But that's it for this pick overall. I'll see you guys next time, and as always, thanks for watching.